Kurtop here, and these are 100 ancient tunnels around the world that no one could have built. Monster burrows. In South America, there are thousands of tunnels, some as narrow as animal passages, others like corridors in a military base, 4 meters wide and hundreds of meters long. Who dug them out? Water and lava are ruled out. Geologists unanimously say it's not natural. There are grooves on the walls, as if made by claws. In one of these caves in Argentina, they found the answer: the skeletons of 2 giant sloths, each weighing about 4 tons, with claws up to 20 centimeters long. They were the ones who needed tunnels of that size. It is believed that they dug burrows for generations to raise their offspring and to shelter from the glacial climate. And the narrower passages might have belonged to other monsters, ancient giant armadillos. Their modern descendants also dig, just on a smaller scale. And this raises the question, what else lies beneath our feet if such tunnels could be dug not by humans, but by animals? The preserved body. In 1719, at the Falun copper mine in Sweden, miners made a sinister discovery. They carried the body of a man out of the flooded area. It was astonishingly well preserved. Judging by his clothes and appearance, it seemed like he had died just a few days ago. It looked very strange considering that the abandoned mine hadn't been used for many years. The body was put on public display, hoping to find relatives or acquaintances. Soon, Margareta Olsdater appeared, claiming that the man before her was her fiancé, who had disappeared 42 years ago. When the water was pumped out, it turned out that the deceased had been soaked in a solution of vitriol, copper sulfate, which preserved his remains from rapid decomposition. However, as the body dried out, this natural preservation began to petrify the body and then break down. Unfortunately, the fate of the unfortunate man did not end with a simple burial. The local residents, shocked by such a rare phenomenon, kept his body on display for the public for another 30 years. Only then was he buried in a church. After some time, during another reconstruction, the body was discovered again. This time, they decided to finally lay him to rest in the city cemetery. The underground fortress of Iran. Imagine an ordinary sunny day in 2006. A resident of the small Iranian city of Nushabad decided to dig a well in his backyard. But after another strike with his pickaxe, the ground literally gave way beneath his feet. The man didn't fall into water, but into a bottomless black void that concealed a secret buried under the sands for 1,500 years. This is how the city of Uyi was accidentally discovered, an amazing underground city, now seen as one of the most complex fortifications. The archaeologists who arrived at the site were amazed by the scale. This is not just a system of cellars or shelters. It's a full-fledged mirror city that goes 3 full levels deep underground. The first level starts at a depth of 4 meters, and the lowest one goes almost 18 meters underground. All of this was carved out by hand in solid rock back in the time of the Sasanian dynasty. Why did the ancient Persians need to build an entire civilization underground? The answer lies in the history of constant wars. For centuries, this region was a battleground for raids by Mongols, Arabs, and other nomads. The people of Nushabad found a brilliant way to protect themselves. Instead of building high walls, they simply disappeared. When dust kicked up by enemy cavalry appeared on the horizon, the entire city went underground. The entrances to Uyi were disguised as wells, hidden in dense thickets, or even inside ordinary residential houses. The enemies could camp for weeks right above the heads of thousands of people without even suspecting their existence. The technical design of Uyi baffles modern engineers, making them wonder how thousands of people could stay in an enclosed space for weeks without suffocating. The secret lay in a unique ventilation system. Ancient builders carved vertical shafts that connected all 3 levels to the surface. Due to the difference in temperature and pressure, the air inside constantly circulated, staying fresh even on the lowest level. But if the enemy still managed to find the entrance, Nushabad turned into a deadly trap. The corridors here were intentionally made, so narrow and low that it was impossible to stand up straight or turn around with a sword. The invaders had to move in single file, bent over, which made them perfect targets. In the darkness, by the dim light of clay lamps, the city's defenders used a system of hidden niches for sudden attacks. In addition, Deep pits with rotating stones and two massive millstones weighing several tons awaited uninvited guests along the way, which could only be blocked from the inside. It was the perfect design for guerrilla warfare, where every meter of the tunnel worked against the attacker. Life underground was organized with remarkable precision. The city had storage facilities for food, sleeping areas, and even a complex sewage system that carried waste far beyond the residential zones. Today, researchers are convinced that Nushabad is only a small part of a vast network. The Uyi tunnels may stretch for dozens of kilometers, connecting different settlements and fortresses in the region. Looking at these gloomy labyrinths, you realize that beneath the feet of Iranians lies not just history, but a true underground fortress, ready for a long siege. Today, amid rising regional tensions, these ancient survival technologies are becoming alarmingly relevant again. How many cities remain buried beneath the sands, and what secrets do they hold in their endless darkness? This could have been in the textbooks too. Imagine you're an Egyptologist. You've spent your whole life studying ancient Egypt, written a dissertation, teach courses at a university, and have published several books. And one day someone puts new results from an analysis of the soil beneath the Sphinx on your desk. There are traces of water erosion, very deep ones, the kind that only happens after centuries of heavy rains. The last time such rains occurred in Egypt was 10 to 12,000 years ago. That means if it's true, the Sphinx is 23 times older than everything we know about Egyptian civilization. So what are you going to do with that? Most Egyptologists did exactly what you would probably do yourself. They said it was either a mistake or the wrong type of stone. Because to admit that the Sphinx is not from 2500 BC, but at least from 10,000 BC, means admitting that there was an advanced civilization that we know absolutely nothing about. This isn't a minor correction in a textbook. It's a complete revision of all human history from scratch. And it's no wonder that people don't want such changes. Geologist Robert Schoch, who first described this water erosion in the 1990s, is still publishing to this day and still hasn't received a single clear refutation. Only a condescending comment that he doesn't understand the specifics of the Egyptian climate. He's now over 60. I wonder if he'll get recognition during his lifetime. The history of science shows that there is a chance, but sometimes you have to wait a very long time. But for now, let's turn to what has already been definitely confirmed. At the same time, the Egyptian authorities did not allow independent research under the Sphinx for a long time. The official reason is not explained. What is under it is unknown. Seismic studies in the 1990s showed possible voids in the foundation. There are voids there. No one has checked what is inside them. A ship under the streets of Manhattan. New York is the city that never sleeps, a symbol of modernity and the triumph of concrete. But what if I told you that right now, beneath the feet of thousands of passers-by, 6 meters deep under the asphalt of Manhattan, there are remains hidden that are older than the United States itself? This story began in 1613. A Dutch trading ship called the Tiger, commanded by Captain Adrian Block, dropped anchor in the harbor that would later become New York Harbor. These were the early years of exploring the region, long before skyscrapers appeared here. But the expedition ended in disaster. A fire broke out on board, and the Tiger turned into a blazing torch, slowly sinking to the bottom off the coast of the island. 300 years passed. In 1916, workers laying a subway line under Manhattan suddenly came across massive charred logs. Imagine their shock. They expected to see bedrock or dirt, but instead they found the skeleton of an ancient ship entombed deep within the earth. At that time, technology did not allow for a detailed analysis. The find was simply handed over to a museum, where it gathered dust for decades. But in 2025, archaeologists and dendrochronologists decided to reopen the investigation. The main question, is this really the legendary Tiger? Scientists use dendrochronology, the analysis of tree rings. Each ring is a kind of genetic code of time. Researchers Martha and Manders and Martha Dominguez Delmos are studying 8 feet of the keel and frames. If the rings show that the tree was cut down in the Netherlands at the very beginning of the 17th century, it will become a worldwide sensation. But how did the ship end up in the middle of dry land, 6 meters underground? The answer lies in the greed and ambition of the first settlers. The Dutch and later the British desperately needed new land for construction. They decided the best option was to expand the island by dumping soil, construction debris, and old boats into the water beyond the shore. The shoreline was pushed back, and the sunken tiger gradually became trapped, buried under layers of artificial land. At the excavation site, along with the ship, they also found other artifacts: a Dutch broad-bladed axe, trade beads, clay pipes, and even a small cannon. These items are not just trash. These are traces of the first contacts between Europeans and the Lenape tribe. It was the Native Americans who helped Captain Block survive after the fire and build a new ship, on which he was the first in history to map the East River and the Long Island Sound. Today, the tiger is not just a piece of rotten wood, it's the patient zero of New York's history. And if research confirms its authenticity, we will have physical proof of how the modern metropolis grew on the bones and ruins of the old world. Ancient structure in the Black Sea. Off the coast of Abkhazia, scientists from the International Underwater Archaeological Expedition discovered important archaeological finds. With the help of special equipment and divers, they explored depths from 1 to 60 meters in the waters near the cities of Gudauta and Sukhum. The most significant find was the discovery of the remains of a medieval structure in the Sukhum Bay at the mouth of the Besledka River, where the ancient city of Dioscuria is believed to have been located. In this area, where an ancient stele had previously been found, archaeologists discovered a semicircular masonry structure, probably a tower with attached walls. It is made of large pebbles with a limestone mortar. There is pottery present in the masonry. Due to the large amount of sand and silt in the water, it was difficult to photograph the object. So a detailed survey is planned for 2024-2025. In the waters near the city of Gudauta, archaeologists found many vessels from the ancient and medieval periods, including an amphora at a depth of 4,850 meters. The room for getting high. In the highlands of the Andes, on the territory of the ancient complex of Chauvin de Huantar, archaeologists stumbled upon a room they were not supposed to find. It was completely buried, with no visible entrances, no windows, no doors, just a narrow passage, as if someone had deliberately hidden this space from prying eyes. Inside, there were 23 artifacts. All of them are related to the use of psychoactive substances. Some of them are thin, hollow bird bones, sharp, perfectly crafted like tubes. Research showed that traces of tobacco and DMT, a substance found in ayahuasca, remained on them. And this is where the questions begin. What was the purpose of this small dark room with inhalation tubes? Why was it isolated? Why was it built in such a way that it would later be hidden forever? One of the authors of the study says this is not spontaneous shamanism. This is a ritual, strictly controlled and formalized. And perhaps it was not intended for everyone. Only the elite had access to these practices, possibly priests or ruling castes. The hallucinations here are not just a journey within oneself. This is a mechanism of power. A small room, 23 people, darkness, and a hallucinogen that changes the perception of reality. Such conditions could create contact with gods, trance, visions, and if ordinary people believed that the priest really spoke with spirits, then the priest could use this as a tool both for control and for governance. 50,000 years and no explanation. In 1997, American archaeologist Albert Good began excavating a mound in South Carolina. The place is called Topper. Even then, he found a tool that was 15,000 years old. This was already inconvenient in itself because according to the generally accepted version, people came to America no earlier than 12,000 years ago through the Bering Strait. But the scientists grumbled and agreed. Fine, they moved faster than we thought. We can accept it if we don't dwell on it. But in January 2026, new results came from 2 laboratories at once from deeper layers of the same hill. 2 independent laboratories, different methods, and the same result. 50,000 years. Now that's something we can't just live with. 50,000 is 11 times further into the past than the Egyptian pyramids. At that time, Neanderthals were roaming Europe. There was no land route to America. The sea level was different. The Bering Land Bridge hadn't appeared yet. So, there was absolutely no way a human could have been in South Carolina 50,000 years ago, but here are the tools lying right there. The official response is silence, and this isn't the first time. When data clashes too hard with what's commonly accepted as true, the first reaction is almost always the same. Not let's check, but it's probably a mistake. Not because scientists are bad people or do it on purpose, but because, like everyone else, they have something to lose. Dissertations, grants, university positions, reputations they've built over the years. If that 50,000-year date is confirmed, it won't just mean rewriting one article, but an entire field of science. And that's painful. It's easier to wait. No conferences, no urgent expeditions, just silence and cautious wording in private conversations like it requires further study. Because discussing this publicly means admitting that the entire theory of the settlement of the American continent, which is taught everywhere, needs to be revised. And that means other people's dissertations, other people's careers, other people's reputations. Nobody wants that. And that's why it's so important that a few researchers still say out loud, we need to dig deeper. Because if people were in South Carolina 50,000 years ago, they couldn't have lived only there. There must be traces somewhere else. We just aren't looking yet. One person dug in one place for 30 years and found something. Imagine what will happen when such places start being searched systematically. It's only a matter of time. And maybe that's exactly why some people prefer not to rush. Although the honest answer here is, the longer you wait, the more questions pile up. All across North and South America, campsites that are 20, 25, even 30,000 years old keep being discovered. Each one can be disputed individually, but together, they form a picture that's getting harder and harder to ignore. Topper is not the last inconvenient discovery in this part of the world. It's just the most recent and the most convincingly documented so far. Still, a few researchers are saying out loud, new expeditions are needed all along the East Coast. Some suggest that the first Americans didn't travel through the tundra, but along the Pacific coast by boat. And all their campsites are now underwater, because the ocean level has risen by 120 meters since then. That would explain why there are no traces. For now, it's just a theory. But at least it tries to answer the question. There's one thing I think is important. We say that official science is silent. But let's be honest. Among scientists, there are people who understand that this issue is serious. They talk about it in private conversations, at small conferences, in cautious wording in articles. They just don't speak about it loudly. Science knows how to answer the question of how, but when it comes to the question, what if we're wrong? It handles it much worse. Human psychology is such that admitting our mistakes is very difficult. It's a bit reminiscent of the situation with the theory of plate tectonics. It was proposed back in 1912, but it was only taken seriously in the 1960s. It took 50 years to acknowledge the obvious. And 9,000 kilometers from here, in Brazil, exactly the same story has been going on since the 1970s. But there, the story has an ending. The secret arteries of Iran. If the underground Nushabad was a place to save lives, the engineering network became the key to an entire civilization's survival. We're used to thinking that Iran's main asset is oil, but for 3,000 years, the most valuable resource here was ordinary fresh water. To obtain it in the sun-scorched desert, the ancient Persians created a system whose scale modern science still cannot fully comprehend. We're talking about qanats, grand underground aqueducts that turn dead sands into flourishing oases. Just imagine the scale of this madness. The total length of all qanats in Iran is an incredible 300,000 kilometers. To help you grasp the scale of this achievement, that distance is enough to wrap around the Earth at the equator almost 8 times. This is the longest and most complex hydraulic system ever created by human hands, without the use of machines. The most astonishing part isn't the length, but the precision of the calculations. Ancient engineers, armed only with primitive levels and ropes, laid tunnels at depths of dozens of meters with a slope of just 12 millimeters per meter of path. It was a meticulous job. If the slope was too steep, the water would quickly erode the rock and collapse the tunnel. If it was too shallow, the water would simply stagnate and silt up. The qanat's longevity comes from water flowing deep underground in total darkness. This completely eliminates evaporation even in the most extreme 50-degree heat. when everything on the surface dries out in just a few hours. The construction of one such canal took 10 decades and required the work of entire generations of specialists, who were called mukani. It was the most dangerous profession of the ancient world. A worker would descend into a narrow vertical shaft to a depth of up to 300 meters. That's the height of a modern skyscraper. In cramped conditions and under constant risk of collapse, he carved through the rock by hand, guided only by sound and air movement. The Qanat in the city of Gonabad, built 2,500 years ago, is still considered the pinnacle of this craft. Its main shaft goes as deep as the height of the Eiffel Tower, and it still supplies pure water to about 40,000 people. Militarily, these underground arteries were Iran's main trump card. While enemy armies perished from thirst outside the city walls, the defenders of the fortress enjoyed inexhaustible supplies of icy mountain water hidden deep underground. Besieging such cities was pointless. The water was out of reach for the enemy. It couldn't be poisoned or cut off without going underground. Today, these ancient corridors are surrounded by new rumors. Modern military facilities in Iran and secret ballistic missile depots are being built using the same principles, and according to some researchers, are even integrated into the old Qanat branches. This turns the country's underground into an endless labyrinth, where the ancient thirst for life merges with modern technologies of war. We look at these wells in the desert and see only holes in the sand, but beneath them beats the heart of a civilization that has endured for 3,000 years. The secret of a 4,000-year-old artifact. In 2000, the archaeological world was puzzled by a stream of unique antiquities on the antique market. Jewelry, weapons, and ceramics with exquisite designs and inlays appeared as if out of thin air, raising questions about their origin. The pieces, distinguished by intricate symbolism, were attributed to Central Asia, but it was later discovered that they were not forgeries. An investigation in Iran in 2002 revealed the secret behind these finds. The arrests of dealers led to the discovery of the location of the artifacts, where a flood in 2001 revealed an ancient Bronze Age necropolis. Local residents began selling the artifacts, thus revealing the existence of a previously unknown culture. Archaeologists were amazed by the scale of the discovery and began studying the site, excavating the main necropolis of Maktutabad and two burial mounds, South and North Konar Sandal, uncovering the remains of ancient structures and evidence of a highly developed civilization. In 2003, under the leadership of Yusuf Majidzadeh, systematic excavations began, lasting several years and revealing amazing artifacts and evidence of an ancient city existing here. Debates about the origin and significance of the Jiroft culture continue. Some scholars believe it to be the legendary errata from Sumerian texts. Others suggest an association with the ancient kingdom of Marhashi. Despite differences in opinion, excavations at Jiroft have provided invaluable information about an ancient civilization, leaving much room for further research and discoveries. A real temple underground. Imagine descending 3 floors beneath the ground in Malta, in Hal Saflieni. The corridors were carved out 5,000 years ago, but the main magic is in the oracle room. A whisper there turns into a hum, and a low male voice at around 111 Hz makes the walls vibrate so much that your chest trembles. Scientists have confirmed this is the resonance of the human body. After 90 seconds, it feels like the sound comes from inside your bones. In the fall of 2024, Italian acousticians scanned the temple with a laser scanner and found another cavity behind a blocked passage. It also resonates at the same 111 Hz. It turns out that ancient craftsmen deliberately carved out an entire chain of sound chambers. The priest spoke a single word, and its vibrations filled the hypogum, putting those present into a light trance. No better technology was needed for the ritual. They haven't cleared the chamber yet, worried about collapsing the vaults, but plan to insert a thin microphone probe. If anything is found there besides stone, statuettes, vessels, maybe bones, it will become clear that this was not just a crypt, but a laboratory of ancient sound. For now, the oldest speaker on the planet, built 5,000 years ago and still working without a single crack, lives on a quiet tourist street. There is only one question. How could people 5,000 years ago calculate the acoustics they needed in a cave so precisely.
Боги из подземелья.
In ancient Nineveh, the Assyrian Empire's capital, archaeologists discovered a monumental relief buried before the northern palace throne room entrance. The slab is almost 6 meters long, 3 meters high, and weighs about 12 tons. The image on it is striking in its detail. In the center of the relief stands King Ashurbanipal. On either side of him are two main deities, the supreme god Abshur and the goddess Ishtar, the patroness of the city. Behind them are strange figures. One of them resembles a man with the body of a fish. Another is a figure with raised hands, possibly a scorpion man. This is not a scene of submission, but of asserting power. The king is depicted not as an ordinary ruler, but as a link between the world of humans and the gods. But the main thing is something else. The relief was not destroyed. It was carefully buried. They didn't throw it away, they didn't break it, but deliberately hid it. People do this either to preserve something or so that no one would ever see it again. This happened after the fall of Assyria, probably during the Hellenistic period. And that's strange because these halls were already known in the 19th century. The British took dozens of reliefs from there, but this one remained in place. Maybe because no one knew where to look. Maybe because that was the intention. The relief itself was in the main part of the palace, right opposite the entrance, the most important place, the most visible one. And then, silence for 2,000 years. A bracelet that shouldn't exist. In 2008, fragments of a bracelet were found in Denisova Cave in the Altai. Denisova Cave is a place in the Altai Mountains in Siberia where, several tens of thousands of years ago, 3 different human species crossed paths: Denisovans, Neanderthals, and our direct ancestors. Imagine 3 different types of humans living in the same region. Sometimes they meet, sometimes they fight, sometimes they have children together. It sounds like the plot of a science fiction novel or a video game, but this is not fiction or imagination. This is literally what happened in the Altai region many years ago. They lived side by side, sometimes fought, sometimes traded, and even had children together. All of this has been proven by DNA analysis of real samples. Science has done what once seemed impossible. It has reconstructed the relationships between different human species. For the first time, scientists compared the DNA of modern humans with DNA extracted from Denisovan and Neanderthal bones. And they discovered that these sequences are present in the genomes of living people right now. You yourself quite likely carry a few % of Neanderthal DNA. This is not a metaphor or a poetic image. This is literally a fact that can be verified by taking a test at the nearest genetic laboratory. We are not merely studying these people from a distance. We are literally their descendants. Fragments of their DNA are inside us right now. Some people living today carry a few % of Denisovan DNA, and they just don't know about it. The bracelet belonged specifically to the Denisovans. The green part is made of chlorite, a semi-precious mineral with a greenish hue that had to be found, mined, and processed, polished so well that it reflects light on a sunny day, and by the night fire it shines with a deep emerald color. It's a beautiful item. The find is 50,000 years old. It's already incredible. At school, we were told that the Stone Age was all about clubs and caves, but here we see jewelry. This already shows a sense of aesthetics, which shows that the Denisovan wanted to look beautiful. It's a need that, for some reason, we are used to considering purely modern. But when scientists looked at the holes in the bracelet under a microscope, the story became completely different. The hole was drilled, perfectly even with smooth walls. Imagine you're trying to drill through hard stone without any metal tools. You only have another stone, bone, or wood. You're working by hand, rotating the tool manually, trying to keep a constant speed. You'll end up with something uneven, with jagged edges and deviations. It's impossible to keep the speed and direction constant by hand. But here, we see perfectly smooth holes. That's exactly what amazes researchers. If you drilled this by hand, the walls of the hole would be uneven, with characteristic scratches and deviations. That's not the case here. The walls are smooth, as if a machine was used. Officially, this technology appeared among humans in the Neolithic era about 12,000 years ago. The bracelet is 4 times older than that. Imagine putting a smartphone in front of a medieval blacksmith and telling him It was made in the year 800. That's about how the scientists felt. The head of the excavation, Anatoly Derevienko, described the technique briefly. The ancient craftsman used techniques not thought typical of the Paleolithic era. His colleague Mikhail Shunkov stated directly, the Denisovans were technologically more advanced than Homo sapiens and Neanderthals of the same period. A bold statement, but he has the bracelet in his hands. And so far, there is no other explanation for it. Of course, there were skeptics. The bracelet could have ended up in this layer from more recent deposits. Additional studies were conducted. Oxygen isotope analysis showed that the layer had not been disturbed. The bracelet had been there since the time of the Denisovans. Now, scientists from Russia, Britain, and Australia are re-examining all the dating. There is evidence that the age could be even greater, up to 65,000 years. If this is confirmed, explaining the origin of this bracelet will be even more difficult. That's what still worries and troubles me. From an entire species of people who lived on Earth for tens of thousands of years, only a few teeth, a fragment of a pinky finger, and this bracelet remain. A bracelet that reflects the sun in bright light and shouldn't exist. I'm sure that there is still so much we don't know about our past, especially about the beings who were very much like us. They lived here for tens of thousands of years. They built, they thought, they wanted to be beautiful. And from all of that, only one green bracelet remains. The Martian Guest from Allen Hills. Antarctica is not only a perfect archive of Earth's history, but also the best repository of extraterrestrial objects on the planet. In 1984, in the Allen Hills area, a search team discovered a meteorite weighing almost 2 kilograms, which was designated ALH 84001. 10 years later, this unremarkable stone sparked the biggest scientific scandal of the century. Analysis of the gas in the sealed glass inclusions inside the meteorite showed that it arrived from Mars about 13,000 years ago, after traveling through space for millions of years. In 1996, a group of NASA scientists led by David McKay published the results of scanning electron microscopy of the stone's inner layers. The images revealed carbonate globules and microscopic structures resembling fossilized bacteria. These formations had a segmented shape similar to terrestrial nanobacteria, but were dozens of times smaller. The publication was so sensational that U.S. President Bill Clinton made a special televised address announcing the possible discovery of evidence of extraterrestrial life. Skeptics in the scientific community later put forward alternative theories, claiming that such structures could have arisen as a result of
процессов, то есть
the involvement of living organisms. However, supporters of the biological theory point to the presence of magnetite crystals and chains of polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons inside the meteorite, which on Earth are usually products of bacterial activity. What is important is that the meteorite itself is estimated to be 4 billion years old, a time when Mars had a dense atmosphere and liquid water on its surface. The discovery at Allen Hills turned Antarctica into the main laboratory for astrobiology. The continent's ice acts as a natural preservative. Meteorites here are not exposed to chemical effects from soil or moisture, preserving them in their original state. ALH 84001 remains the most thoroughly studied object in human history. And although debates about the nature of the Martian worms continue to this day, this rock became the first physical evidence that life could exist beyond our planet. Maya cosmogram. In the south of Mexico, in the state of Tabasco, archaeologists studied a site, an enormous earthen structure hidden beneath the forest. It's almost invisible in satellite images, but LiDAR, laser scanning technology capable of removing vegetation, revealed the clear outlines of a platform nearly 1.5 kilometers long. This structure turned out to be older than all known Maya centers, dating back to around the year 1000 BC, that is, 1,000 years earlier than their famous pyramids and cities appeared. Around the platform, they discovered remains of canals, embankments, and straight roads, all strictly aligned with the cardinal directions. It appears to be a meticulously planned complex. They were built without stone, only from earth and clay. Scientists call Aguada Phoenix a cosmogram. This is not a temple or a city, but rather a symbolic space, a model of the world embodied in the landscape. Here, judging by the findings, mass gatherings, rituals, and feasts took place. But there are no signs of kings, palaces, or sculptures. It appears everything was built collectively by communities, not under a central leader. This discovery was unexpected for archaeologists. Previously, it was believed that monumental structures among the Maya appeared after the formation of complex cities and elites. Aguada shows the opposite. Large structures could have appeared before states as a result of collective efforts. Today, the site continues to be studied. For the residents of the region, it is becoming a point of pride, and for archaeologists, a reminder that history does not always develop in a straight line. Sometimes people create not for power, but for an ideal. Life inside a volcano. If the previous sites were created solely for war or supply, then this place proves that underground in Iran, you can not only survive, but truly live for centuries. We are heading to the foot of Mount Sahand, to the unique village of Kandavan. From a distance, this place looks like a giant anthill or a set from a science fiction movie. Here, people didn't build houses out of bricks. They literally carved their homes inside solidified lava. These unusual cone-shaped rocks are called Quran. They were formed millions of years ago after a powerful eruption, when streams of molten material mixed with ash and mud. Over time, wind and water turned these boulders into sharp peaks as tall as a 5-story building. But the most interesting part began about 700 years ago. Legends say that the first inhabitants came here seeking refuge from the advancing Mongol army. They discovered that volcanic tuff is soft enough to work with, but when it comes into contact with air, it becomes as strong as granite. Inside each of these stone cones, there is a fully equipped multi-level apartment. Usually, the first floor is used as a livestock pen, the second and third as living rooms, and at the very top there are storage rooms. The walls are up to 3 meters thick. This creates a unique insulating effect. When outside, there is a raging icy wind, and the temperature drops to -20. Inside, a pleasant warmth is maintained. In summer, when the sun literally melts the stone, these caves remain refreshingly cool. The engineering of Kandavan is striking in its simplicity and efficiency. Every window and every niche is carved to make the most of the sunlight throughout the day. Inside the rocks, staircases are carved connecting the floors, and the walls are polished smooth. The most amazing thing is that Kandavan is not a dead museum. People still live here. Today, inside these ancient caves, you can see modern televisions, refrigerators, and even high-speed internet. The residents have adapted ancient technology to the needs of the 21st century, creating perhaps the most eco-friendly and secure housing on the planet. Kandavan clearly demonstrates an important trait of Iranian culture: the ability to use the features of the landscape for protection and habitation. This is living proof that people are capable of turning even harsh volcanic rocks into a cozy home that cannot be destroyed by time or wars. The village kept a secret for 500 years. In May 2026, in the English village of Bloxham, this is a small place in Oxfordshire with about 1,200 residents. A typical quiet British village with a pub and a church. Something interesting happened. For centuries, locals told each other stories about underground tunnels beneath the village. Everyone thought it was just a legend, the kind of stories people tell by the fireplace, but forget about by morning. Archaeologists politely agreed, but never studied it seriously. But in May 2026, a team of researchers finally decided to check, and it turned out the villagers weren't making it up. There really is a system of underground tunnels beneath Bloxham, hidden, branching out, going in different directions under houses and streets. What had been passed down for centuries as a local legend turned out to be a real engineering structure. What shocks me about this story is how many such legends around the world are still waiting to be uncovered. After all, the underground tunnels in Bloxham are not an isolated case. All over Britain, all over Europe, there are hundreds of similar local legends about underground passages, about hidden rooms, about something being under our village. Most of them have never been checked by anyone, because it's folklore, not serious science. Bloxheim showed that sometimes it's worth believing the local villagers. How many places like this are waiting worldwide? How many grandmothers in some Italian villages tell their grandchildren about underground passages beneath the houses, while the grandchildren laugh at their grandmother and pretend to believe her? And how many of these passages actually exist? No one knows, because no one has checked. It is still unknown exactly who built these tunnels and for what purpose. The age and purpose are still being studied, and the work continues. These could be medieval passages that were built all over Britain for a variety of purposes, from storing food to serving as passageways. They could also be older structures. But the very fact of the discovery is already important for history. People have talked about them for centuries, and they turned out to be right. This might be the smallest story in scale among all of today's. Tunnels, not an ancient civilization. But this one seems important to me as a principle and as a reminder that we shouldn't dismiss things just because they don't fit into our usual picture of the world. How often have we laughed at folk legends as mere superstitions, only to later find that some myths turned out to be real? Troy was a myth until Schliemann found it. In the 1870s, everyone told him he was chasing a fairy tale, but he found a city. Let Atlantis remain a myth, but under the waters of the Black Sea, scientists have found submerged Neolithic settlements, a real village that went underwater 78,000 years ago. 3,600 years of silence. For thousands of years, the sand kept the secrets of ancient Thebes, which is now Luxor, until archaeologists looked beneath its centuries-old dust again. In recent excavations near the mortuary temple of Queen Hatshepsut, scientists discovered a system of tombs up to 3,600 years old, along with portals into the life and beliefs of the ancient Egyptians. The work has been carried out with the participation of the Zahi Hawass Foundation and the Supreme Council of Antiquities of Egypt since the fall of 2022. Among the finds are bronze coins with the profile of Alexander the Great, children's toys made of fired clay, various ornaments, winged scarabs, and even carved beads. Here, a part of the Hatshepsut temple was also discovered, as well as rock-cut tombs from the Middle Kingdom and remains of the Asasif necropolis from the Ptolemaic period. The burial shafts date back to the 17th dynasty. In one of them there was a wooden coffin with the remains of a child. All of this helps us to better understand how people lived, believed, and died. A special find is the tomb of Jiku Times, a courtier associated with Queen Tetisheri. The inscription indicates that the burial dates back to the 9th year of the reign of Ahmose I. The war boughs found here may suggest that the owner served as a soldier and fought during the expulsion of the Hyksos. In November of the same year, another tomb from the Middle Kingdom era was discovered nearby, containing 11 sealed burials. Archaeologists are sure that Luxor still holds many similar surprises. Every new artifact, whether it's beads or a battle bow, subtly lifts the veil on the culture and history of pharaonic Egypt. The flesh of the fish god. In the cliffs of Bandiagara lives the Dogon people. Once every 60 years, they hold the Sigi festival. The main ritual is to bring out the huge Nomo mask. According to legend, Nomo is an amphibious creature. Once it arrived in a copper egg, rumbling like thunder, fell into a lake, and came out of the capsule half human, half fish. Nomu showed people star maps. It was indicated there, next to the bright Sirius, there is another dark and very heavy star. Astronomers discovered this white dwarf, Sirius B, only in the 19th century, but the Dogon spoke about it long before telescopes, so that his lesson would not be forgotten. Nomu, according to the myth, shared his flesh, giving people pieces of his skin as sacred food. That is why the Dogon still call his power Nyamya Numu, the life inside the fish god. They keep long tablets with a pair of stars in secret sanctuaries. Scientists still cannot understand whether this knowledge is ancient or a later hint from missionaries, but the Dogon themselves are sure. The copper egg really did fly in, and one day it will return when the time for the next Sigi comes. The history of UFOs is always a mix of fear, technology, and myths. Let's keep that in mind and move on. The goddess of death Cyprus, the settlement of Lem. A small limestone figurine from around 3,500 BC, a female silhouette, broad shoulders, arms on the hips, a stump for a head. Such figurines are usually interpreted as fertility statues, but with this one, things didn't go as planned. The first modern owner was Lord Elfand. Within 6 years, all 7 members of his family died. The figurine was passed on, and in the next 3 houses, similar stories happened. Sudden deaths, illnesses, accidents. When the new owner suspected a connection, he donated the figurine to the Royal Scottish Museum in Edinburgh. There, the rumors only grew stronger. One of the curators who worked with the exhibit died within a year. That's how the nickname Goddess of Death was born. What's real and what's legend? There are few documents about the early owners. The dates don't always match up. Most likely part of the curse grew out of coincidences and stories retold in the press. But the events are so frightening that the figure is now firmly part of cursed collections, like Egyptian mummies and the Bassano vase. The irony is that originally it was most likely made as a symbol of life and fertility, a statue of a goddess who was supposed to bring children, not take them away. Today, the exhibit is shown with a disclaimer. The archaeology is real, the curse is the culture built around it. But if I'm talking about strange discoveries, I can't ignore the Lembe goddess. It's a rare case when a small piece of limestone gave rise to a legend that survived a 1,000-year journey from a Cypriot village to a museum display. An artificial island in the middle of a lake. And here's a find from Scotland. This is a completely different scale. Loch Borgastale in the Outer Hebrides. If you've never been to the Hebrides, just imagine windswept islands in the northwest of Scotland. Gray waters, low skies, almost no trees. Not the most obvious place for complex construction. And yet in the middle of the lake stands a crannog, an artificial island built by people on stilts right in the water. Crannogs are well known in Scotland and Ireland. They were built over thousands of years, and most of them date back to the Iron or Bronze Age, about 24,000 years ago. A small fortified platform above the water. Wolves can't get to it. Enemies will have a hard time too. It's quite practical and beautiful. Living above the water, seeing the reflection of the sky in the lake, hearing the splash of water against the stilts. People clearly valued not only safety, living above the water is also beautiful. It's the sunrise over the lake. It's the morning mist above the water. It's the sunset reflected in the water right at your feet. 5,000 years ago, people also knew how to appreciate beauty. But when researchers began to study this particular crannog on Loch Borgastale in more detail, they discovered a wooden platform underneath it, a much older one. It turned out to be more than 5,000 years old. 5,000 years is older than Stonehenge, older than the pyramids of Giza. This is the beginning of the Bronze Age in Britain. People were just beginning to work with metal. And during this period, someone was already building complex engineering structures right in the lake, creating artificial islands out of wood. This requires the skill to choose the right type and size of wood, the ability to drive piles into the lake bed, which is not easy even without metal tools, the skill to lay the platform so that it can support the weight of people and buildings for a long time. This is not improvisation or coincidence. This is craftsmanship accumulated over generations and passed down as part of the culture. It is not a coincidence or a primitive solution. This is a construction tradition. Local legends sometimes remember things that scientists don't know yet. And here's what's important. We found this platform only because someone decided to look under the already known crannog. How many such platforms lie under other lakes in Scotland, where no one has dived yet? He burned a wonder of the world for likes. In antiquity, on the western coast of Asia Minor, archaeologists reconstructed the outline of the famous Temple of Artemis, one of the 7 wonders of the world. Only fragments of columns and the foundation remain, but even that is enough to understand the scale. However, one of the strangest and saddest stories of antiquity is connected with the temple, the story of Herostratus. In 356 BC, he set fire to the temple, not for revenge or faith, but for fame. Herostratus wanted his name to be remembered, even if he had to pay for it with his life. The temple burned down on the same night, according to legend, that Alexander the Great was born. The fire destroyed one of the greatest structures of the ancient world and became an example of senseless destruction. After the fire, Ephesus authorities banned anyone from saying Herostratus' name under penalty of death, but this only made the name endure. The historian Theopompus recorded it, along with the paradox itself. The man who destroyed a masterpiece became immortal precisely because of his crime. When archaeologists in the 20th century excavated the lower layers of the sanctuary, they found traces of an ancient fire, inner beams, melted fragments of tiles. And even in these pieces of ash, there is a strange sense of irony. The greatest temple of its era was destroyed not by enemies, not by a natural disaster, but by a person who wanted to be remembered. Today, the name Herostratus has become a symbol of destructive fame, a reminder that history remembers not only creators, but also those who tried to be remembered at any cost. Even today, we often see bloggers who are willing to do terrible things for the sake of popularity. It turns out people practiced this even thousands of years ago. The Hollow Earth Doctrine, the search for entrances to other worlds. Among all the strange theories supported by the SS leadership, the most mysterious remains the Hollow Earth Doctrine. This was not just a mystical fascination of Adolf Hitler and Heinrich Himmler, but an official state program that received enormous budget funding. Nazi ideologists seriously believed that our planet is hollow inside, and that beneath the thick crust there is another life, high-tech civilizations, and even an inner sun. In 1942, by the personal order of Hermann Göring, one of the strangest military operations was organized. A group of scientists led by physicist Heinz Fischer went to the island of Rügen in the Baltic Sea. Their task was to direct powerful radar installations not toward the horizon, but into the sky at a 45-degree angle. They thought that if Earth were concave, radar beams bouncing off the atmosphere could detect the British fleet through the planet's center. The experiment failed.
Но сама попытка его проведения показывает.
Mysticism penetrated deeply into the Reich's military strategy. Special attention was paid to the search for an entrance to this underground space. The Nazis searched for them in Tibet, in the Himalayas, and in the far north. However, the most famous location became Antarctica. In 1938, Captain Alfred Richer's expedition on the ship Schwabenland declared a vast area of the icy continent as German territory, naming it New Swabia. Officially, this was done to protect the whaling industry, but in secret SS reports, there were mentions of warm oases and geothermal caves that could lead deep into the planet. After the war, there were rumors among American submariners that German Type 21 submarines were heading to Antarctica, loaded with secret archives and rare materials. There is a theory that the Nazis discovered giant underground cavities there, created by warm currents, and tried to establish a secret base, 211. Admiral Karl Dönitz once made a mysterious statement. The German submarine fleet is proud to have created an impregnable fortress for the Führer on the other side of the world, a true earthly paradise. Was this just rhetoric, or did the Nazis really find something unusual under Antarctica's ice? Mainstream science denies the possibility of voids on such a scale, but numerous reports of Ahnenerbe operations around the world make historians return again and again to the question, what exactly were the SS men looking for in the most inaccessible corners of the Earth? And did they manage to find it? The giant staircase of Antarctica. One of the most discussed discoveries made through satellite monitoring was a structure in the Enderby Land region. At the coordinates 68 degrees 54 minutes south, latitude and 88 degrees 42 minutes east longitude, an object was discovered that was named the Giant Staircase. It is a series of massive stone steps that emerge from a creeping glacier and descend steeply down the slope. The total length of the visible part of the structure is more than 200 meters, and it does not fit into the surrounding landscape at all. The main argument in favor of the artificial origin of this object is its geometry. Each step is exactly 14 meters wide and about 4 meters high. Unlike natural terraces, which are formed by erosion or landslides, here we see perfectly flat horizontal platforms and vertical cuts at a 90-degree angle. Geologists officially call this a stepped glacier, but ice when moving cannot maintain the shape of a clear rectangle for decades. The material of the object is dark andesite, an extremely dense rock that was used to build megalithic complexes in Peru and Bolivia. The scale of the Giant Staircase is impressive. If these are indeed the remains of an ancient structure, then it surpasses the largest Inca foundations in size. Scientists from Pennsylvania State University, during their analysis of shadows in images from 2026, confirmed that there are virtually no gaps between the blocks, which indicates a masterful fit of the stone. The fact that the site is located at an altitude of 2,000 meters above sea level makes the theory of its creation by any civilization known to us impossible. This is physical evidence that in ancient times, when Antarctica was not yet buried under ice, there were megastructures here, the scale of which we are only beginning to comprehend. Access to this area is strictly limited today, and the coordinates of the site are often blurred on commercial maps, which only fuels the interest of independent researchers. Imperial purple in children's graves. This is a story I didn't plan to include until I realized how much it changes the way we thought about the Roman Empire, York, United Kingdom. May 2nd, 2025. York is one of the main Roman cities in Britain. The remains of Roman walls and gates still stand there. There are a lot of excavations there. Archaeologists are studying Roman infant burials. Such finds are regularly discovered in Britain. It's a well-known tradition of that era. Just routine work. But in these particular burials, traces of fabric were found. And when the fabric was analyzed, it turned out to be Tyrian purple, the very same imperial dye that, in the Roman Empire, was literally worth more than gold. A single cloak could cost a fortune. It was extracted from special sea mollusks. And to get enough dye for a single cloak, thousands of these mollusks had to be processed. Purple was worn only by emperors and the highest-ranking aristocrats. According to some sources, wearing it without permission was considered treason. And here is this purple on the burial shrouds of an infant in provincial York. Let's think about what that could have meant. On one hand, there were people in York of such high status that they could afford to bury their children in fabric worn by the emperor himself. That would mean that provincial York was much more important in the imperial hierarchy than we thought. On the other hand, there was a tradition in Rome that we know almost nothing about, a special attitude toward deceased children, some kind of ritual specifically connected to imperial purple. Neither of these versions fits with what we think we know about the Roman Empire. This makes the discovery especially valuable because it suggests that we are missing something in the history of ancient Egypt. Let's first figure out what Tyrian purple is, because without this, the scale of the discovery is unclear. Tyrian purple is not just an expensive fabric. To make it clear, a single gram of this dye cost more than the average annual income of an ordinary Roman citizen. This is literally the most expensive substance in the Roman Empire. The law directly restricted who had the right to wear it. And here is this fabric in children's graves in a provincial British town. You know, what amazes me about this find is not even the fabric itself, but the fact that it changes everything about the history of Rome. 2,000 years of study, thousands of books, hundreds of films, and then you find purple on children's bones in York, and you realize that you don't understand anything. The vessel from Bergama. In the Bergama Museum in Western Turkey, there is a huge stone vessel. It's so massive that it's hard to think of it as an everyday object. Its height is almost that of a human. The walls are carved from a single piece of stone, and the surface is covered with reliefs. It's about 2,000 years old. Such vessels were used in ancient Pergamum, when the city was the capital of a powerful Hellenistic kingdom and one of the cultural centers of the Mediterranean. Their purpose is still being debated. Some believe that they were used to store sacred oil. Others think that these were ritual containers for water during ceremonies. The reliefs depict masks, garlands, and lion heads. The details are crafted so precisely that you can even see the texture of the fur and the folds of the fabric. And this is despite the fact that the master had to work with stone, not bronze or wood. The main question is how such vessels were moved. They weigh several tons. They are found in temples, on terraces, and near sacred springs. Someone carried them up the steps, set them on pedestals, and made them part of the complex's architecture. Pergamum is known for its altar of Zeus and its library, which rivaled the one in Alexandria. Stone cubes. Not far from Albuquerque in New Mexico, a group of tourists came out of a canyon. At first glance, it looked like an ordinary rock formation, but the longer you look, the more it feels off. The cliff's edges are perfectly straight, and the faces are smooth, as if cut by something sharp rather than by time. In some places, the stone masses form clear cubes. Each one weighs about 100 tons. There are no signs that they were worked, but there is no chaos of nature here either. Everything is too geometric. Comparisons immediately started online. Someone remembered the Bimini Road in the Bahamas, mysterious stone slabs going underwater. Someone else mentioned the megaliths of Baalbek. But still, the main reaction is the same. This looks wrong. It's too perfect to be natural, too heavy to be man-made. Of course, scientists can explain a lot, weathering, crystal geometry, pressure, fractures, but visually it's not convincing. Because when you stand next to these shapes, you don't get the feeling that nature made them. The question arises, if this is really artificial, then who made it and why? This is not the first or last place where nature seems to accidentally imitate someone's work, but sometimes you get the suspicion that it's the other way around, that it's not nature imitating technology. We still don't know who was here before us. The first king. Belize, Caracol's jungles. For nearly 40 years, archaeologists Arlen and Diana Chase have excavated staircases, markets, and dams here until they reach the heart of the Khan complex, the heavenly place. Under a layer of slabs, they found a narrow passage behind which a chamber painted with cinnabar was revealed. On the floor lay a skeleton, its shoulders draped with jade beads. Nearby were 11 painted vessels, carved bone tubes, a mosaic mask, and spondylus shells, the color of raw meat. The hieroglyphs on the stelae have long referred to the first ruler of the city, Tikab Chak Hand of Thunder. Now the text matched the bone. The dating is around the year 350, only 23, 10-day periods after the ascension, the year 331. It turns out that Caracol was an independent power even before the famous arrival of the Teotihuacan envoys in 378. It did not awaken because of outside influence. It was already ruling, trading, and taking tribute. The objects around the body speak for themselves. Jade is a sign of royal blood. Cinnabar is a symbol of the power of sacrifice. Spondylus shells indicate long-distance trade through the Caribbean. And the thin bone tubes are an attribute of priests who inhaled cocoa powder before rituals. This is not a random collection, but portraits of the state assembled in its founder's personal capsule. For scientists, this is not just a skeleton, but the first chapter of Caracol's history, hidden by vines for almost 1,500 years. A city that is considered a myth. And finally, a story that honestly sounds like a movie plot, Alexandria on the Tigris. A city founded by Alexander the Great during his eastern campaign in the 4th century BC, one of the many cities he named Alexandria. There were more than 20 of them throughout the conquered world. Most of them are well known. But Alexandria on the Tigris, in present-day Iraq, was considered for centuries either a myth or a place that had long been lost and would never be found. At the beginning of 2026, its rediscovery was announced. And this, without exaggeration, became one of the most talked about news stories in the world of archaeology in many, many years. Because we're not just talking about some city, we're talking about a place that was part of the world of Alexander the Great, a man who changed the map of the planet in just 10 years. Satellite analysis of the area, comparison with ancient sources, and then excavations. And here it is, the city that was considered a legend for 2,000 years. A trading metropolis that once connected the Greek West and the Persian East stood at the crossroads of the major trade routes of its time. Imagine the scale. During its heyday, everything literally passed through this city. Spices from India, silk from China, gold from Arabia, Greek philosophy, and Persian astronomy. It wasn't just a trading post, it was a living hub where two completely different world views met. Just imagine for a second the scale of this discovery. It took humanity 2,000 years to find the city founded by one of the most famous people in history. Alexander the Great is not an unknown leader of a small tribe. This is a man who is studied in every school in the world, and for 2,000 years no one could find his city. Even though ancient historians wrote about it, Strabo, Arrian, Diodorus, Sacculus. Even though people searched for it in different eras, they were always looking in the wrong place. It was only found when satellites came along that look down from above and can see the outlines of buildings underground. Alexandria on the Tigris is not just another ancient city. It is a key point through which goods, ideas, and people pass between two completely different civilizations. Greek philosophy, Persian mathematics, Indian spices, and Egyptian papyrus. All of this passed through places like this. And we couldn't find this particular city for 2,000 years. That's what amazes me. We're used to thinking that ancient history is fairly well studied, that the main cities are known, the main routes are described, and the main events are documented. Alexandria on the Tigris shows this isn't true. Even well-known historical figures, like Alexander the Great, who changed the entire known world in just 10 years of his campaign, left behind things we still haven't found. and places that are yet to be discovered. And the satellites we launch for navigation and communication are also doing one of the most important jobs along the way. They look down at the Earth from above and help find things that have been buried for thousands of years. Alexandria on the Tigris is the first major ghost city discovered this way. And most likely, it won't be the last. By the way, during the first excavations in 2026, they found coins with the profile of Alexander, remains of Greek columns, and fragments of trade records in 2 languages, Greek and Aramaic. This is literally material evidence of that very crossroads of civilization. A sanctuary inside the rocks. Deep within the Iranian mountains, there are sites that have remained unseen by outsiders for centuries. These are the temples of the god Mithra, a mysterious underground sanctuary where, thousands of years ago, rituals were performed, the details of which still baffle scientists. Mithraism was the religion of warriors and the elite, and its main requirement was absolute secrecy. That is why Mithraea, as these temples were called, were always built either completely underground or carved inside rocks. The most impressive example of such a structure is located near the city of Maragay. This is the Mare Temple, which is a giant hall carved inside a huge hill. When you enter, your perception of space changes. This is not just a cave, but a perfectly weathered geometric structure. The huge dome carved out of solid rock impresses with its precision. The ancient builders did not use supporting columns or external supports. The entire vault stands through careful engineering and the strength of the rock itself. A single opening has been made in the center of the dome, through which a thin beam of sunlight enters. At different times of the year, this beam falls on specific areas of the floor, serving as a kind of astronomical calendar for the priests. The atmosphere inside such temples was both oppressive and majestic at the same time. There were no windows here, and the only source of light, apart from the sun, was oil torches. Temple walls were often decorated with reliefs of constellations and mythological scenes. Scientists still debate how the craftsmen managed to perform such fine, detailed carving in conditions of almost complete darkness. They probably used a system of bronze mirrors that relayed sunlight from one to the next into the deepest corners of the sanctuary. But the most interesting thing is the acoustics. Due to the vault's unique shape, even a quiet whisper at one end of the hall is clearly heard at the other. This created the effect of the deity's presence and enhanced the psychological impact during initiation rituals. The warriors who came here for initiation took an oath of loyalty that could not be broken under penalty of death. This tradition of devotion and discipline lingered in the Iranian mountains for centuries. Today, many temples are either abandoned or turned into mosques, but their underground structure remains unchanged. They remind us that for the ancient inhabitants of Iran, the underworld was not a place of fear, but a space of supreme true power. While empires and religions changed on the surface, ancient knowledge endured deep within the rocks, which even today makes us stand in awe of the mastery of those who knew how to command the very stone itself. The Denman Glacier in East Antarctica reveals the deepest point on land on Earth. Research in 2026, conducted using next-generation radars, confirmed that beneath this icy stream lies a canyon whose depth reaches 3,500 meters below sea level. For comparison, this is almost 10 times deeper than the shores of the Dead Sea. But what attracted scientists' attention was not so much the scale of the depression, but the abnormal thermal readings at its bottom. Seismic sensors recorded stable vibrations at the base of the canyon and water temperature that is 4 degrees higher than at the surface. This indicates the presence of a powerful influx of geothermal energy, or a hidden circulation system that sustains life in complete isolation. That same year, deep-sea probes transmitted data indicating the presence of complex life forms in this trench, with a genetic profile that differs by 30% from all known marine species. Today, the Denman Abyss is called a time capsule, where, due to the immense pressure and the specific chemistry of the water, evolution could have taken a completely different path. The fact that the bottom of this canyon is only a few hundred kilometers from the South Magnetic Pole makes it an ideal place to search for artifacts that could have been preserved in their original state for millions of years. Humanity's oldest crossing. In the sands between Baghdad and Basra lies a place known as the Cradle of Cities, the ancient Sumerian Girsu. 5,000 years ago, the heart of the kingdom of Lagash beat here. It was here that humanity first began to record its thoughts on clay tablets on a large scale. But the main sensation of Girsu is not the texts, but the oldest bridge on the planet. This brick bridge has stood here for more than 4,000 years. Just think about it. It's older than most of the empires we study in school. But the fate of this discovery is a real tragedy. In 1877, the French archaeologists working here resembled treasure hunters more than scientists. They were so eager to find statues in gold that they plowed through ancient layers, destroying everything. The looters who followed the archaeologists plundered and sold more than 35,000 cuneiform tablets. We lost entire libraries of knowledge simply because of the excitement of the first explorers. The bridge itself was discovered in the 1920s, but for almost 100 years, no one understood what it was. It was called a temple, a sluice, a dam, and only recently did archaeologists officially confirm that it is a bridge. For a whole century, this unique structure stood defenseless against the scorching sun and winds of Iraq. Today, a large-scale rescue program is underway in Girsu. Many specialists are teaching local archaeologists how to preserve these bricks so that the oldest crossing in the world can last at least another 1,000 years. Ancient labyrinth. Modern remote sensing methods are giving archaeology new tools to understand the past. One vivid example is the study of the surroundings of Rujum El Hiri, an ancient complex of stone circles to the northeast of the Sea of Galilee. This mysterious monument clearly shows how satellite images allow us to view the landscape from a completely different perspective. Scientists analyzed photos of the area within a 30-kilometer radius and discovered numerous megalithic structures, massive circles with thick walls, and mysterious flower-shaped enclosures near rivers. According to one hypothesis, all of them could have been elements of irrigation, defense, or livestock enclosures. In addition, the images show burial mounds of various shapes and sizes. They might be burial sites or signal mounds. The results of geological measurements are no less intriguing. It seems that the territory itself has shifted over the past millennium, which puts the hypothesis about the astronomical purpose of Rujum El Hiri into question. The satellite image reveals the multi-layered nature of the construction, an archaeological palimpsest, where later structures were built on top of earlier ones. Such studies open a door to the distant past. By comparing satellite data, excavation results, and geophysical analyses, scientists hope to reconstruct the lives of the ancient inhabitants of the Levant and better understand why they built such monumental stone labyrinths and surrounded them with complex agricultural systems. Vietnamese mummies. This was 9,000 years before the Egyptian pyramids. Mammoths were still alive in Siberia, and Europe was just emerging from the Ice Age. It was at that time in Vietnam that someone very carefully placed the body of a deceased person in a fetal position, treated the body with plant-based compounds, wrapped it in materials, and placed it in a specially prepared spot in the ground with a special headrest. In 2025, after a detailed comprehensive analysis of these remains, chemical, isotopic, and structural, scientists announced this is the oldest, verified, and confirmed example of intentional mummification in the world. Not Egypt, where mummies appeared about 5,000 years ago, and that already seems incredibly ancient in itself. Not Chile, where the Chinchorro culture with mummies is about 9,000 years old. Vietnam, Hoa Binh province, 14,000 years ago. That's a record. This is important because mummification is not just a technique. Behind it lies the belief that the body matters after death, that there is something beyond life for which this shell is needed. This is already religion, in the simplest sense of the word, the belief that death is not the end. And it existed in Vietnam 14,000 years ago when people were still hunting with stone spears. We are used to thinking that spiritual life appeared in Sumer, in Egypt, where the first cities were. But people had to solve the problem of food and shelter first, and only then think about the god of death. Vietnam says that's not the case. People thought about death even back when their main task was simply to survive. And perhaps it was this very desire to understand what happens after death that pushed them to build, unite, and create traditions long before the first cities appeared. What do you think? Who was the first to come up with the idea that there is something after death? Write your thoughts in the comments. There's another point worth mentioning. Mummification is not just an idea. It's a technology that needs to be developed. You have to observe how the body decomposes. Try different ways to slow it down. Remember what worked. Pass this knowledge on to the next generation. Knowledge that someone accumulated over years and carefully preserved. Imagine you're living in a small group of people. Your main task is to get food and not die. And yet you still find the time and energy to carefully prepare the deceased for what comes next. Because for you, this is just as important as food. This says something very serious about what it means to be human. Long before people invented the internet and went to space, before they discovered oil and learned to smelt iron, they valued human life much more. Kurgan near Ostrog, Russia, Salakard, the territory of the Obdorsky Ostrog. While digging a trench, they uncovered an Neolithic burial site about 5,000 years old. There are already more than 12.5 burials. The rituals are different. Some bodies are tightly wrapped in birch bark. Others lie in boats, miniature vessels for the journey to the underworld. The burial pits were dug up to 2 meters deep with steps going down. The reverse staircase seems to be turned upside down from the Ekur. The walls were lined with planks. Everything was generously sprinkled with ochre. On top, a wooden flooring, then a mound. Inverted vessels were placed on the mound. The ground would settle. The vessels would fall inside and seal the layer. In some chambers, there are traces of fire. They were set on fire before the final covering. The deceased were also sprinkled with ochre and provided with belongings. The main sensation is the ancient copper items, a trapezoidal pendant, fragments of a bronze plate, and small details. In the Arctic 5,000 years ago, metal was either obtained through long-distance trade or a chain of intermediaries. This shows the Northerners weren't isolated. Instead of a dull cemetery, we see a rich collection of artifacts and rituals. Birch bark as a cocoon, a boat as a symbol of transition, fire as purification, ochre as the blood of the earth, copper as prestige. The North shows that complex rituals and distant connections reached here much earlier than we used to think. Baltic Disc. 2011 Swedish divers scan the bottom and see a perfect circle 60 meters in diameter. A straight groove extends from it, as if something braked along the seafloor before landing. The photo circulates in the media. An underwater flying saucer, the Millennium Falcon. Tourists book spots on boats. Ufologists are already writing books. 2025. A team of geologists takes an underwater LiDAR scan and conducts their own thorough research. The structure is strange, but inside it's ordinary granite with glacial rock shells on the cuts. It's a boulder rolled by ice for 1,000 years until it got stuck in silt, leaving a beautiful alien-looking trace. The conclusion is the same as with previous finds. Sometimes a perfect saucer is just a stone polished by a glacier, but it was this very stone that made people dive to the bottom, bring new equipment, and clearly show how science debunks myths and fakes. The stone remained a stone, and the Baltic Sea got its first underwater geopark. Roman Road in Manchester on Liverpool Road. They removed the asphalt resurfacing and just 40 centimeters below, a paved Roman road was revealed. The layers are visible like a cake slice, the original bedding, leveling, and gravel repair layers. The road was regularly maintained to prevent potholes from forming. Archaeologists call it the best Roman find in the city center in the last 20 years. The route led to a fort that once stood nearby. Along with the roadbed, household items were lifted, ceramic fragments and pieces of decorative glass, ordinary road debris from daily life, frozen beneath the modern street. After conservation, the site will be documented, items cleaned, and transferred to the exhibition. A fortress in the middle of the desert, the ruins of the ancient Berber Xardra, lost in an ocean of sand dunes, are a remarkable architectural monument and a testament to the lives of people who mastered the desert lands. This Xar, located in Algeria, was hidden under layers of sand for a long time, which allowed it to be well preserved over time. Xardra is a traditional fortified village characteristic of the North African region. It was built to protect the residents and their property from raids and the harsh conditions of the desert. The fortifications include massive walls and towers, which not only protected the inhabitants, but also served as shelter from the scorching sun. The date of the Xar's construction remains unknown, which adds to its mystery. Modern technologies such as satellite imaging make it possible to study the ruins and their surroundings from above, offering a new perspective on the architectural heritage of the Berbers. Glass worms under Antarctica. The Japanese Chimu Ice Prop Project drilled the Ross Sea shelf ice in February 2025. At a depth of 820 meters, the camera came across strange threads, transparent and as thin as a hair. They stretched through the ice crystals, bending as if alive. The probe tried to lift them. The thread crunches and breaks, leaving fragments behind, like the thinnest glass. Chemical analysis showed it was almost pure quartz, with microparticles of magnesium and sodium. Geologists know about silicate glass in lava, but no one expected to find it in deep ice, especially at 20 degrees Celsius, the first theory. These are subglacial salt lakes releasing silicic acid. It solidifies and grows into fibers. It's a kind of natural fiber drawing process, only at sub-zero temperatures. There's another theory. Under the thick ice cover, the pressure reaches about the same as at ocean depths, and the shelf constantly trembles from tides and cracks. In these conditions, dissolved silicon could crystallize not as ordinary grains, but stretch into ultra-thin quartz fibers. A natural glassy mineral is extremely rare, but there's an interesting detail. The structure of the fiber is multi-layered, with a core and a shell of different densities, as if it was made for conducting light. It's literally a natural optical cable. In the laboratory, they passed an infrared beam through the thread at a wavelength of about 1.3 microns, the same as used in fiber optics. The light passed through almost without any loss, meaning this cable was formed naturally, but it behaves almost like man-made optical fiber. For now, glassworms are a geological curiosity, but if you imagine that there was once a warm hydrothermal vent under the ice, it would be the perfect place for hidden biological or even technological activity. The team is already planning a second descent to take a long sample in its entirety and check if there are any foreign impurities in the shell. If traces of organics or even scarier microbial backglow are found, Antarctica could get its first real, not fictional, line of communication with other forms of life or engineering. Viking and the Cross. In southern Sweden, not far from the city of Linköping, archaeologists explored an old quarry, an ordinary place where you hardly expect any discoveries. But on the top of the hill among the stones, they came across a strange structure, a solitary burial, a circle of tightly packed stones with a stone coffin in the center. It stood high, apart, overlooking the plain, as if the one lying inside was meant to observe something even after death. The coffin is from the 10th century when Sweden stood between two worlds. Paganism remained strong, but Christianity was already entering people's lives, and this burial is a reflection of that transition. Inside lay a man with an axe and a knife. The remains of fabric are incredible, from a ritual garment. Everything suggests that he was from the upper echelons of society, possibly a warrior, possibly a nobleman. But the way the coffin itself was constructed is no longer a Scandinavian tradition. The stone lining, the orientation, the location on top of the hill, these are already under the influence of Christian symbolism. Such hybrid burials are rare. Most are either completely pagan or already arranged according to all the rules of the new religion. But here, it's a transition, a mixture of rituals. The last pagans still bury their dead with weapons, but are already turning toward the cross, recognizing changing times. This person died at the turning point between eras. He didn't believe in Thor like his ancestors, nor did he accept Christ like future generations would. The underground city of cement. In 1944, when Allied aviation was turning German cities into ruins, the leadership of the Third Reich decided to move critical technologies underground. That's how Project Quartz was born, better known by its codename Cement. The location is the Austrian city of Rotendorf. At first glance, this was supposed to be a factory for producing aircraft bearings for the company Steyr-Daimler-Puch. But when Soviet and American intelligence groups entered these tunnels in May 1945, they realized that not only aircraft parts were being prepared here. The underground city of cement is more than 10 kilometers of tunnels carved into solid rock at a depth of up to 50 meters. More than 15,000 concentration camp prisoners were used for its construction. But what is shocking is not the size, but what was discovered inside. In some halls, the ceiling height reached 15 meters and the walls were covered with a complex shielding system. The reports of the Soviet Technical Commission mentioned strange objects that did not fit into the concept of an ordinary engineering plant. Among them were giant vacuum chambers and massive ceramic insulators, designed to work with extremely high voltages. Why would a bearing manufacturing plant need a vacuum installation that size? There are theories, partially confirmed by declassified NNRB documents, that the cement facility was a cover for research in the field of high-frequency physics and plasma technologies. Some investigators believe that the Nazis were trying to create a device for isotope separation or powerful emitters capable of remotely disabling the electronics of enemy bombers. The most frightening thing happened after the war. Most of the equipment was dismantled and taken to the USSR as part of the war trophy program. But the specifications of this equipment are still kept in classified archives. Moreover, part of the lower levels of the cement facility was deliberately blown up and flooded by the SS themselves before their retreat. For years, the local residents of Rotendorf spoke about strange noises coming from underground and about columns of trucks that were bringing not machines, but strange lead containers into the tunnels. What were the Nazis hiding in the flooded levels of the cement facility? Was it a primitive attempt to create an atomic bomb or something more exotic related to harnessing vacuum energy? The answer still lies beneath millions of tons of concrete and water. But if the underground factories were a triumph of engineering, the ideology behind them bordered on madness. Nazi scientists believed that the fate of the war depended not on the number of tanks, but on how closely they followed the ancient world ice doctrine. Ant-Man skull, Catamarca, Argentina. Builders were digging a trench for a water pipe and came across a series of burial urns. In one of them, they discovered a human skull of a very strange shape, which the local press dubbed the head of an ant-man. The shape indeed is hard to call ordinary. The forehead juts forward and the crown stretches back, making the skull appear squeezed in a vice. Naturally, people first thought of aliens and genetics, but archaeologists quickly cooled things down. Between the 3rd and 12th centuries, the Cienaga and Aguada cultures lived in these lands, and they practiced artificial cranial deformation. The process was simple. They wrapped an infant's head with cloth and fixed it between wooden boards. The soft bones gradually changed shape. Of course, you're probably wondering why. It's simple. Beauty, belonging to a group, social status. Just like today with tattoos or body modifications. It's worth noting that there's almost no evidence of health risks from such practices. A child's skull is flexible. The brain grows, filling the available space. That's why most deformed skulls don't show signs of injury or developmental delay. There's also an alternative explanation, hydrocephalus, which is a buildup of fluid. This was pointed out by Heidi Dawson-Hobbes. But then we would expect other changes, thinner bones, asymmetry. This skull is a good example of why we shouldn't immediately classify such finds as historical anomalies. Sometimes a strange shape isn't a message from aliens, but a very human desire to look like your own people. A scandal that hasn't ended. The last story for today is, honestly, the most uncomfortable one. Not because the facts are ambiguous, but because it doesn't have a good ending. It doesn't end with science being recognized or the truth prevailing. It ends with an ellipsis, Mount Gunung Padang in West Java, Indonesia. The locals have considered it sacred for centuries. They have passed down from generation to generation that something important is here. At the top, there are rows of basalt columns. The official explanation is that it's volcanic rock. Nature can create regular shapes, nothing special. In 2023, a group of Indonesian geophysicists conducted radar scanning of the mountain. It's kind of like an X-ray, but for the Earth. And beneath the surface, they found man-made structures. Several layers of construction. The deepest one is dated to 25,000 years ago. That's twice as old as Göbekli Tepe and 5 times older than the pyramids. If this is true, it would be the oldest man-made structure in human history. They published this in a reputable journal. After that, a scandal broke out. Other scientists picked the article apart. They found real problems with the methodology. Some of the man-made structures are most likely of natural origin. The samples for dating could have been contaminated. In 2024, the journal retracted the article. And what's interesting here is not that it was retracted, but what happened next. The mountain didn't go anywhere. The excavations are ongoing. New independent teams continue to record anomalies beneath the surface. They don't cite the 25,000-year figure, but there's something there. My honest position is this. I don't know what's under that mountain. Maybe the first team was wrong. It happens. That's what science is about. Maybe there's really something incredible there, and we just can't prove it for sure yet. But here's what I do know for certain. After the article was retracted, there were significantly fewer people willing to seriously study this place because of reputation, because of careers, because nobody wants to be the scientist who believed in the Indonesian pyramid. And because of this, because of the human fear of making a mistake, a place that could be the most important in human history just sits there and waits. The mountain will wait. It's in no hurry at all. And you know what gets to me the most about this? The local people have been saying for centuries that this mountain is special. Generation after generation, they've passed down this knowledge. Just like the residents of Bloxcombe passed down the story of the tunnels. Just like Gedron talked about it for 30 years. Maybe that's the main lesson of this whole video. People who live next to something sometimes know more about it than scientists who come for a week with their equipment. 9 stories, and not a single one of them is fully resolved. In the next video, there will be a few more stories like this, which official science prefers not to talk about out loud. There will be something that will make your hair stand on end. I promise. Subscribe so you don't miss it, and make sure to turn on notifications. Otherwise, YouTube simply won't show you the next video. And write in the comments which of the 9 stories caught your attention the most today.